And I had had 7 years of sobriety. I didn't drink. I didn't do anything for 7 years. Well, 6.5. 6.5 years. I like to round up to 7. But
did you enter a group?
Not those 7 years, which I think was was just why it was so easy for me to fall back. And I went 7 years, and but when this started happening, I knew I always had that bottle or that thing that could get me out of my mind, and I started to spiral again, and it all came to a head when, and this was big media coverage too, was I went missing when I was in Florida, and I just had lost
your mind.
I want to put it a different way, but in a sense, yeah. And I just wanted to disappear. And so I started telling my family these horrible things. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to, what am I doing? How am I going to continue? How am I going to go? How am I going to move forward?
And did you really think about suicide in that moment?
I mean, I'm sure there were moments that it crossed my mind, but I really wanted to just disappear. I didn't know what that meant. I just didn't want to be around anymore. And so I had gotten I rented a car out in Florida, and I got in my car, and I just drove and went to bars and tried to drown my sorrows, and ended up not responding to my family at one point.
Do you have your phone with you in that moment?
Yeah, I had my phone, and then I had left my phone in the car, and I started to not respond, and then hours went by, and my family, especially my brother, was going, wait a second, like after everything he just said, the way he sounded on the phone, and now he's not responding, I have to do something. And so they called the police and reported me missing, and I ended up getting to a hotel somehow and checking in, and the next day the police found me because it was all over the news, and so I'm sure someone from the hotel was like, oh, well, he just checked in here last night. And I was picked up and taken to a facility, like a mandatory 3-day hold facility. And after that, I got back home, and my family was just so worried about me and concerned. And my brother had found a rehab facility for me. And I think it was alcohol and other things that I needed to go to rehab for, but really it was my state of mind. I didn't know how to handle everything that was going on, because with trauma also, when something traumatic happens and you've had trauma in your past, all of your trauma comes back at once.
Yes.
And now you're dealing with everything. You're not just dealing with what's happening at that moment. You're dealing with everything.
Yes, it's a large train going direct to you.
Yep.
In that moment, and you keep thinking all the stuff.
Exactly. Thinking of everything, and you have to deal with it all at that time. And so I ended up getting, my brother found this facility for me, and I ended up going to Nashville, Tennessee, and checking into rehab. And I was at the lowest I'd been since the Amanda Show days in that situation, and I just was completely lost. But luckily, while I was there, I was able to clear my system, and my mind wasn't clouded and blocked and foggy, and I was able to start dealing with all of these issues and emotions and traumatic events and experiences in a healthier way around people who knew what they were doing when it came to things like this. And I was there for quite some time and was able to come out and have more tools to be able to face this head on and realize, these things don't have to define you. You're not alone. It's okay to talk about. There are people you can discuss these things with that won't judge you, that will that are there to they just want to see you get better and to move forward, and able to give me the tools to where I'm at in my life is, I look back and a lot of people ask me if there's, things I regret in my past and things that I would change. And of course, the obvious answer that you would think would be, well, yeah, all the mistakes and everything that I did wrong, and I would change all of that. But you look back at it now, and I see that there's so much to learn from all of that. And now, we were discussing just before, is moving forward now and knowing and having a much broader knowledge of how to navigate through this life. Because everyone handles trauma differently. So it doesn't matter whether, I was in a really bad car accident when I was 19.
Actually, you almost died.
I almost died. I broke my jaw in 3 places. All these teeth are fake. I fractured my neck. My jaw was wired shut for 6 months.
Wow.
And, whether it's an event like that or something like I went through prior to that, or things that occurred because of the trauma I was dealing with, and realizing too that, taking responsibility for, I'm going to start crying again, taking responsibility for the things that you have done, because nobody forced this into my system. Nobody forced me to treat people the way that I did. Nobody forced me to react the way that I did. There was still responsibility and decisions that I made. But understanding that that's not you, that doesn't have to be you moving forward, and it doesn't have to define you or destroy you.
Yes, of course. And for example, if you feel in a low point right now, today, tomorrow, who you need to call, who you can call?
Well, that's a big part of it, is keeping people around you that build you up when you're doing well, and you're in a great state of mind or a healthy state of mind. Keeping people around you that'll build you up in those moments, but also keeping people around you that you trust and that feel comfortable enough with you to be honest and say, bro, you're going down that path again. Hang on, back up, think about this, take a breath, let's get through this. I love you, but I'm not just gonna sit here and praise you and say everything you're doing is great, because right now you need to step back and realize that, is something going on inside? Is there something happening that's making you sort of veer this way? Let's get you back on track, So it's really important to have a solid support system. And I think that with my brother and, my brothers and my sister and my dad and my mom, and I have very close friends out here, especially in Mexico. I have a great group of, I always keep now, because back in those days, there were a lot of people just hanging on and wanting a piece of this and wanting a piece of that, and because you got to get to go to the cool parties, and you got to be around the famous people, and you got to go, and oh, Drake's taking us out to the best dinners, and we're getting to go on vacations, and we're getting to do cool stuff. And you realize that those people are temporary.
Yes.
And having people around you that know you completely and know your darkness, know your light, and see you for who you really are and love you for that, is really, really important to to keep those people very, very close to you.
Okay.
And that don't have a fear of talking about things or bringing something up to you when it needs to be said.
Do you have a therapist or a professional near? Because about drugs issues, it's very difficult to be alone.
Yeah, I have a therapist back in Los Angeles, and I have one here, and it's very hard to be alone. But we were discussing that earlier
Yes.
off camera, and I think that's something that people need to hear is when I was younger, it was very, very hard for me, especially after what had happened to me, for me to be alone by myself with my own thoughts and to feel comfortable and safe just being alone. I always had to have people around. And with that, you start attracting or keeping people around you that shouldn't be around you just because you need
Yes.
to be around people. And
Because you can't be alone.
yeah, because you can't be alone. But I think what we were saying earlier is it's very, very important to work on being able to be alone and feeling okay about that.